You've coached over the years, Rick, and I'm curious about, did you from the get-go of tryouts, how soon did you establish who the players were that were going to play the special team situations and those that weren't? In other words, yeah, do you start picking a team and you know who your first, second, third, fourth lines are?
Not when I start picking the team, no. I generally work on the philosophy that you're speaking of, Wally, where up till Christmas time, everybody gets to play in all situations, and you earn the right based on your performance as to how that's going to play out in the latter half of the season. For instance, when I was doing midget AAA in the AMHL, the max tournament was the turning point. Everybody would play in all situations and scenarios up until the max, and then we would start delegating based on merit up to that point in the season, which didn't mean that you were excluded after that part, but once that regime got itself installed, you could play your way back on, but you needed to start performing. And sometimes that's what it took to get some players to realize that if they want something, the carrot is there, but they're going to have to earn it. And I have no issue with that as a general philosophy. I think part of the training that we're doing is having you to put your best foot forward to get the best result for yourself and your group.
When you were doing that, did you encounter any disagreement from the parent group or administrators that wanted you to create the identity sooner than later?
Occasionally.
Okay.
And we just dealt with them on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah.
When they came up, we explained where we're going with it and moved on.
Okay, that I think
I have noticed in the past where I've been challenged on putting kids back into situations at that stage where someone would come to me and say, we've already learned that he's not capable. And my response was, well, we've been working with him on it, and we need to find out what he's learned, how he's developed. Is he getting the message or not? So you get the pushback on both sides in some cases.
Rick, how many kids did you find rose to the occasion and earn more special team situations?
I really don't know how to quantify that, Wally. It's not a thought line that I've actually entertained.
Yeah.
I would say that based on the performance of teams that I've coached in that realm, where we're always stronger at the back half of the season, that it had a very positive impact, meaning that our depth was greater than some teams, and we were able to call on more people in game situations than other teams might be.
Well, I think what you're saying is the same thing as Kerry Bracco. He managed the bench so everybody felt valued. Those that weren't playing on special teams to the same degree, might have been killing penalties, probably were, but four lines were four lines and they all got to play and they felt valued. I think that's just the essence of having this conversation. If you don't operate that way, then you have sort of an elitist, special treatment. You don't have a team philosophy and concept. And what you do and have done for years, and Kerry has always done, is manage to pick teams and let the chips fall where they may as they evolve in the first half. And the management of that bench relative to how they earn their ice time relative to the roles they played, it's paramount in developing the life skills that you need to play a sport. So you know that, I know that, Kerry. We all know that, but it still appears to be the bottom line of the problem that faces minor hockey, and that's really the biggest thing that concerns me the most.
Well, I think overall, any pushback you get from parents of a negative variety is usually around one of two things. One is ice time in general,
Yeah.
and the other is opportunities to play in differing in all situations.
Yeah.
One other aspect of the earlier conversation, Wally, is that in the latter half of the season, game situation, competitive situation in the moment also dictated. If you were needing a goal, the game situation dictated it was all on the line, then obviously you go with your stronger group at that phase. And that was, in my case, it was always explained to the kids that this was what's likely to happen. Here's why it's going to happen. And we had that conversation before it was just dropped on everybody. Conversely, if the game situation was well in hand, ideal opportunity to put people that you wouldn't normally do into those situations, give them the experience, give them the opportunity to show that they've picked something up along the way and that they're more accomplished than what they started out as.
Yeah. No, it sounds like common sense, but common sense isn't common. How do you?
That right?
I don't know, Rick. You've been around a long time, but why?
Why?
Yeah.
I enjoy doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Hockey is golf has become my old guy passion, but hockey's still there, and was my focus athletics wise all the way through. And I enjoy seeing the progress of the kids, and I call them kids because that's what they are.
Yeah. Well, why are we in the minority?
Good question.
Tom, why are we in the minority? Because you operate your bench. There's nobody who could get upset with their kid. It's ice time and roles they might play, because right now at your level, it's close to rolling it.
Well, don't say that. We got one of the mothers talking last game because her daughter was spending so much time filling for the D who jumped up the ice. And she wanted the D to make sure they got back right away so her daughter can get onto offense. And her daughter was having looked like she's exhausted, eh?
Yeah.
Well, she wasn't involved in the play. A lot of times she's our best player.
Yeah.
But she wasn't even involved in the play. So, of course, she was the last forward up the ice all the time, and that's why she was covering. But
Yeah.
she thought it was all because of, that situation. Eh? So you never make everybody happy. But, yeah, we like, I don't know, especially at this age, I don't know why you'd go to practice if you hardly ever get to play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think I'd go to practice if I was going to be sitting out all the time. And so my philosophy is that, and then the last part of the game, you put on your best players to hang on. We haven't even done that much this year, but when I coach higher levels, you put on the players, but it's game to game because it's not always the same player who's gonna get it done, right? Some days you're flat and some days you're flying, and so you got to have a sense when you're coaching who's going, who's not going, and this kind of stuff. So it's a little bit of an art to it, but I just have I just can't fathom why you would ever even bother going to practice or all this if you're just going to sit around all the time, and just watch your teammates play. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Mike?
But I always played because I love to play, not love to watch other people play. So.
It just literally just had the conversation back and forth with a coach down in Florida who is like just a young guy, new coach, real good coach actually, but just, trying to get a different perspective. Like, how do I approach? I got two goalies, one stronger than the other. How do I approach them both? And I'm like, well, number one is the kid on your team? Okay, you picked them on your team. Then it's your job to play them. Like, you have to find a way to play them. And these are 13 and 14-year-olds and 12-year-olds and 10-year-olds. I said, so, and then really, to Tom's point, who can go to practice? Like, think about a goalie who knows they're never going to play. They're the backup goalie. Like, that's one of the thing that hurts me the most is when I hear youth coaches talk about their starter and their backup. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. This is where you have an obligation and a duty and it's your job to find ways to incorporate those kids into the team concept, make sure that goalie feels that every day he shows up, he's competing and getting a chance. And then you have to give them a chance. Because I think what I see the most happen in my area here is all of a sudden that quote unquote starter goalie gets hurt, 3 weeks left in the season. And now you're going to tell the other kid how much you love him and how much you need him and how much you appreciate him. And he's like, what are you talking about? You never even let me play, so.
Speaking of that point, Mike, in the first time I went to the Nationals with the University of Calgary, the pregame skate, and we'd had this one guy played since about mid-November. And the guy caught an edge, slammed into him, ripped his knee up. And we're playing in the National first game, Final Four that night. And it was telecast on whatever. And the one guy dressed, but he didn't take any warm-up in there. Speculating maybe he went out partying the night before or something like that. This guy's playing. And we were leading that game by 2 goals with 2 minutes left, and we lost in overtime. But you never know. It might be a good idea to let everybody get in the net for a little while. Because he'd say for 4 months.
And just for you, like again, to your point, like I don't know, if I could go to practice. I see it in high school here all the time. Like, I don't know if I could be on a team when you're really not on the team.
Yeah.
You just bought a jersey and you paid for the you paid for the ice, but you're not on the team. And I think that's the whole point about sports and especially youth sports. I'm not talking about like, when you're getting paid and you have to play to win. I'm talking about you make a team, you are on the team. That's it. Like, just, you got to play. Now, again, I wish I had the text. I'd share it with you guys. But, the way I worded it, the coach, I think a light bulb went off, because I said, it's not about being fair. Like, it doesn't have to be equal. It doesn't have to be this goalie plays 60 minutes and this goalie plays 60 minutes. They both have to have the opportunity to play and feel they're always competing to play. You have to put them in situations to play. But at the end of the day, if the other kid's just working harder and showing up and doing the things they're supposed to do, they're going to play more. Like, we want that. Like, we want that competition. But a kid that's not playing just because you don't think they're as good, but they're working just as hard as everyone else, you have to find a way to get them to be in those situations. Forward, goalie, D. And it's so frustrating to see. I saw my own kid play too much this year. I'm like, you got to play. You're playing 4D. You got to play 6. You got 2 other kids on the bench. Play the other kids. Like, get them on the ice. This kid's exhausted. He looks terrible out there in the third period because he just, he's got like that 28 minutes of ice time. I'm like, play the other kids. And Tom, I think, it is an art. It is a understanding, like, face off in their zone. Look at the team, look at the group that's on the ice. This is my opportunity to get this kid in the game. Like, and I just don't think I don't think a lot of coaches even are in the game. I don't think they're thinking about that. They're thinking about how do I keep this kid from ever hurting me, instead of, wow, how do I put this kid in the place to have success?
Yeah, well, exactly.
That's the problem with this phone call. You guys know this stuff. You're gonna talk to the other 7,000
I think
that aren't on the call.
The issue, to me, there's sort of like 2 phases. You pick a team. If you pick a number 1 goalie and a backup, when you pick, you do have a first choice and a second choice. You've created a mindset. And over the season, that alternating goalies, I believe, is the thing to do in the first half, at least. But I'm going to defer to Rick here, but I just want to mention on the idea of ice time, the AAA playoff game, Carey's son is playing. They get into the overtime. It went to 2 overtime periods. And each team shortened their benches in overtime. And in the third period, and they were exhausted. In the second overtime period, it was like every second shift. And had they used their so-called third and fourth lines at the right time, as opposed to every second shift with the best, fortunately, both teams did it. So they were equally exhausted.
Yeah.
And they gave up breakaways. They had breakdowns that would be from fatigue. And one of the teams won. But I don't believe that any team won. They got the victory, but to manage that bench so you get the most out of everybody and value those guys going into overtime, it's the first round of the playoffs. You're going to need them. So when you say coach with, I call it coaching with the gut, Tom. That's exactly what I'm talking about here. On the bench, coach with your gut. Understand the biomechanics, the energy systems, and the psyche of every player. The best team wins. So, Rick, I wanted to ask you, Rick, and you're all of your experience, and we could talk about goalies. 1-2, 1-1, alternating. To what degree, and where did you end up going when at the most competitive, important times near the end of the year, or the Max tournament, for instance?
Well, when you reference the Max, there was one instance where we had two very qualified goaltenders, but one was recognized as being stronger than the other and did actually get drafted into Major Junior. But when we hit the Max tournament, we started a cycle. It was the so-called second goaltender's turn to play, and he started the tournament for us. And as it turned out, we went to the final, and it turned out to be his turn to play again. And he played. And we lost that final by a goal. We didn't score any. And I'm still to this day not sure how it could have turned out any differently with the other goaltender.
Yeah.
And yet I took some criticism for that. Understandably, I guess, in most of our opinions, you're going to get that pushback when things don't turn out well. But backtracking a little bit here, fellas, I've actually had parents come to me, even though I discourage it in between periods, or lean over the glass and say, "Don't play my kid in the third period. She's not good enough. They're going to hurt you." And I just look back and say, "I'll make that call."
Yeah.
Goes both ways, not very often in the negative side, but you have parents and others that are embarrassed by the performance of their kids and don't really want to have to witness it any further.
Well, I wasn't so embarrassed about my kid, but I never went to the coach, but I'm in the stands going, man, would he be so much better in the last, because he's going to play in the last 2 minutes of the game. I know that. So I'm like, man, would he be so much better in the last 2 minutes if he had rested more in the second period, or if the other kid in the first period gave him a little breather, or, and I think that's that's why the emotions of the game it's so interesting to watch people, like when a goal gets given up or when you score a goal, how that emotional swing of like, okay, that's the game. Like, well, it's not the game. We still have 58 more minutes to play. And I think that's where a coach can influence that bench so much by having the ability to say, okay, you're up, let's go. And, I've seen that, I've done that. It's countless how many times I knew we were going to get to our second string goalie. And we had already established well ahead of time that player was going to play. The kids knew it. The other goalie knew it. The other goalie parents knew it. And maybe it was an issue like at the bar that night, but it wasn't an issue with the team on the bench. It was, hey, we believe in this guy too. And we're actually going to maybe play a little harder because we understand that it's up against him a little bit more. But that's, I don't know, that's the great part about coaching.
Yeah. I've got two stories, Tom, one related to Wes's team. And they lost out in the last game, but it was, you lose two, you're out kind of thing, as everybody knows in the playoff structure and that level of hockey. And Wes called me and we had a good conversation about the season and how the game went and etc. But then near the end of the conversation, he says, Wally, I have to admit, I couldn't sleep last night because near the end of the game, might have been 4 minutes left, one of the assistant coaches came up and said, do you still want me to roll the lines? And he said, you know what? He knows who the better players were. And the assistant coach pressured him. And it's one of those things, you're still in the cities. And he did it, shortened the bench. And here he was. It bothered him. He couldn't sleep at night. And they lost the game. And I explained to him why he did the right thing. And it's called, you want a win-win coach. If you have a philosophy, live by the philosophy, and in that case, you lost the game and you lost the spirit of the kids. Now the season's over, but it still isn't when you've coached all year this particular way. So that's the point I'm making. It's win-win coaching is leave them out there, let them try to get the result. And if you don't, you don't. You've lived by your philosophy. Know your philosophy of development, not outcome coaching. Now, my other story is Pee Wee boys hockey. Mike Petros, who owns the restaurant in town, his dad started. He's coaching Pee Wee hockey and he rolls them. And they're in overtime where it's, I think, 3-on-3 or something. And it's the absolute worst defenseman's shift. And he's out there on the ice already lined up. And the two coaches came over and spoke in his ear and said, God, we're going to get scored on. You can't leave him out there. And so he called the kid over. And I might get the name wrong. He says, Johnny, come over here. And the kid came over with a big smile on his face, said, yeah, what, coach? Yeah. Just go out there and give her your best. And he stayed out and they lost. But he lived by his philosophy. He can look in the mirror, and that's his philosophy. So whatever you do, if you can transmit belief by managing that all year, the idea is to transmit belief and don't lose the spirit of your team. And that's the line between being able to shorten the bench, make the right decision, and communicate in a way that you care about everybody. And being able to do that, that's a fine line in coaching. And I don't know if any of you have had to deal with that moment. I know I did my first year coaching Bantam. And I still remember when I went with the same goalie in back-to-back games, and we won because of it. But I know the look on the other goalie's face, and I still remember it today. It was the wrong thing to do. As egotistical as the championship was, I didn't transmit belief. So that was one of those lessons. And I'm not sorry I did it. I just wish I had managed it during the season, so I could live with it better, and so could the kid and the parents. But anything to add on that, Rick? That story or the discussion?
I think, Wally, if we coach enough, which we all have, you're going to encounter all of these situations. That is your training ground. That, you have your philosophy, but you have to deal with day-to-day situations, game-to-game situations, shift-to-shift situations sometimes where it's called into question which way are you going to go. And quite frankly, in some occasions, there's a good reason to go either way. You hope to be right more often than you're wrong, but you're trying to please a very diverse and wide gamut of opinion and emotions on your team, on your parent group, and sometimes casual observers. I've been challenged from time to time over the years by people that didn't have anybody in the game. They just watched the game and didn't like the way certain things went. Didn't like the way I didn't challenge a referee on a situation. Stuff that's none of their business, but they feel they have to say something.
Well,
we talk about the art of coaching.
Yeah.
And one of the most criticized things is art. What is art? Well, art for you is not necessarily art for me. And coaching is in a lot of ways no different than a painting or a sculpture or some things they call art that I can't figure out what category to put it in.
Yeah. Art might be that gray area of decision making.
Hugely gray. More colorful the gray, the more it seems to be art.
Yeah. And, and I don't know if this falls under art, but when you've had success and you're sort of going with your gut, and I call it, I don't know if it's art, but it's just you get a feeling for a situation. And I have so many situations, and one of them was Junior A hockey, Calgary Canucks, sixth game of a playoff, which we had to win to go to the seventh. And I went to 5D, maybe in the second period, and we won the game. And I don't know why I went to 5D. It's just that they got in a rhythm. And the D that I didn't play, I can't say why I didn't. That's the way I did. But when we won the game and I went in the dressing room, I saw the look on the face of the defenseman who didn't play. And I brought him into the room. I had the trainer bring him in. And I tried to explain to him. I told him, I said, look, I thought we had to go down to 5. And we did, and we got in a rhythm. And it paid off. And I know how you feel, but I promise you, you're going to play the next game. But these situations come up where you do it. And we did win the next game. He did get to play a regular shift, and he came up and he appreciated being talked to. Like right after I had the conversation, it was a relief. It wasn't like you left him out in left field and put up with it, kid, toughen up, suck it up. This is Junior A hockey. You should be able to do it. No, it was realizing you're human. You want to play. Everybody wants to play. And if there's a reason behind why you didn't, please try to help them understand it. And I did that. And I thought that was one of my better coaching moments in terms of achieving that. So go ahead, Rick.
Well, just on that theme, Wally, when I did pull a player or take some ice time away later in a game, well, in some cases it might have been discipline related. In other cases, it was just on the competitive situation of the moment. I took up a station in the hallway on the way out immediately after the game. And I did not miss that player on the way out so we could have a conversation.
No.
He didn't have to always buy into what I was trying to explain to him.
No.
And just as background, this was already a subject of discussion from day one, that this could happen, might happen. You could be involved or you could be not included in it, but we would have those situations where that would come up, albeit later in the season in the ultra competitive side. But I didn't let them get out of the arena without having had that conversation. And I'd have to say, for the most part, that was a very effective process. You can't hide from the situation. You can't try to mask it and pretend it didn't happen or that it doesn't hurt someone's feelings. And quite frankly, as a player, I've been there. I've been the star player on the team, and I've been the guy that didn't even play for a full playoff game until the overtime, and I jumped on just so I could get some ice time. I took it upon myself to be first over the boards. So I know how it feels. I've been on both sides of it, so there's a lot of empathy there. But I think that the big thing is you go into the season, you explain your philosophy to your player group, to your parent group. This is how I function, and here's why I function that way. So let's have the conversation now. And Wally goes back to my code of conduct discussion. It's all part and parcel. And when it happens, I always get to refer back to that. And I try not to let it happen too frequently, but you're serving both masters here. And sometimes the team expects you to do things on the bench to make sure that the outcome is good. And you live and die, you live with all of those decisions, the good ones, and there'll be some bad ones. I had another max situation where we qualified on the last day for the playoff round, for the medal round, and nobody left that arena at Max Bell. I took over the training room down there, and we had one-on-one meetings with the coaching staff and each player. It went on for about an hour and a half after the game. We just went over all the things we talked about, all the things we'd been through as a group, one-on-one with each player, and we won that tournament. And it came out that we had done that, and in the morning of January 2nd, I got a call from a parent wondering why I was picking on his kid. There was no names mentioned, but they implied certain things from what information they were able to garner to say, I've got something to complain about here, and I'm damn well going to complain. And there was no merit to his complaint. I can say that with a straight face. But you just don't know what you're dealing with on the other side. They don't have all the facts, but they have their own assumptions. Those become facts, and then you deal with that situation. But I've always tried to be very upfront with my players and their parent group. This is the way we do things. This is why we do things. And until I learn a better way, this is how we're going to do things. And I think that's good management in itself.
I shared a short talk, maybe two or 3 minutes, by Simon Sinek on parenting and leadership. And that particular talk is, as a coach, you're a parent. And Peter Whitney and I talked last week because he's pursuing the mission statement exercise. And when I sent this Simon Sinek short talk out, he said he tells his captains their role is like a parent on the team. And I never thought of that before. I thought of the role as a coach, Rick, you're a parent of the parents of the kids on this team. So everything you're doing in the interest of their child is objective, proper, unemotional, and whereas parents are caught up with the investment of their blood's thicker than water kind of thing. And they don't see things objectively. They don't let their kids deal with adversity and learn from mistakes. And I think that's what sport teaches you. But unfortunately, but maybe fortunately, there are enough good coaches around that can deal with that at a point where parents will appreciate it in time. But too much of the opposite is going on. Coaches are being turned over incredibly often. It's almost like a Ferris wheel. Good coaches are being cycled and recycled, and maybe for the right reason, because they don't understand the art of coaching. They have the X's and O's down, but they don't have the behavioral ramifications down of coaching. What are you teaching them? And basically, you're teaching trust and respect and effort. And being able to deliver on that consistently, it's something that I don't know how many years I've been preaching it, but it's been almost too many. But we'll just keep on trying to push for things the right way.